What is a hero? A mythological figure, often of divine descent, endowed with great strength or ability? An illustrious warrior? No. It's a person admired for achievements and noble qualities, one who shows great courage. Welcome to the What's a Hero podcast, where we dive deep into what a hero is and what makes them that hero. I'm your host, Ken Frownfelter, and I'm going to be introducing you to some of the world's most likely and unlikely heroes. You may have never heard of them before, and they most likely have never met you. But they all have one thing in common. They are ready to do whatever it takes to help make you better, even if it means sacrificing everything for you. Let's get into it.
This is episode 37 of the What's a Hero podcast with me, Ken Frownfelter. What is service? Is it about giving your time to help those less fortunate? Is it about providing a commodity in a courteous manner? Does the word conjure up images of heroic actions or selfless charity? What does it really mean to serve? Now, making a commitment to serve your community as a police officer is both personally rewarding and extremely hazardous. Now, there's a book out there called Forged in Scars and Stripes, and it's a real-life account of one man's dedication to service as a core value, and how devotion to duty can have a personal cost to the individual and those he loves. So today's guest is actually the author of this book, Forged in Scars and Stripes. And this book chronicles this gentleman's career of the state police, of being a state police sergeant that was abruptly altered when he came to the aid of a distressed citizen. Surviving catastrophic injury, he tells us how love and support from his family, friends, medical professionals, and just a fraternal bond shared between law enforcement officers gave him strength and a new purpose in his fight to return. Now, this gentleman retired in 2017 as a sergeant in the Operational Training Division at the Pennsylvania State Police Academy in Hershey, Pennsylvania. And with over 30 years of law enforcement experience, he had assignments as a patrol trooper and a supervisor, a crime scene investigator, and as a longtime law enforcement trainer. He also served as a military policeman in the United States Marine Corps. So without any further ado, I'd like to welcome retired Sergeant Bob Bemis to the What's a Hero podcast. Welcome, sir. How are you?
I'm doing very well, Ken. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Thank you very much. So I'm looking, I got a copy right here of Forged in Scars and Stripes, a trooper's victory over critical injury. And this just kind of chronicles your whole kind of career and all the twists and turns that it took, huh?
Yeah, it certainly does. I call it the journal of my final 22 months as a Pennsylvania state trooper. But as you said, there's got to be an origin story in there somewhere.
Right.
So, certainly the series of fortunate events, as I like to describe it, leading up to that tragedy, is also covered in the book.
Right. So you like you said, there's got to be an origin story. There's got to be things where they come from and where why it is they happened or whatever. And I think that's something that we like to do on the show here is get into those stories of people and why it is they went and did the things they do, why they serve, why they decided to sacrifice holidays and birthdays and Christmas pageants and soccer games and all that stuff for their kids so they can go serve people they don't even know, and where does that come from and who is that person? So, I mean, I'll ask you the same question, where did that come from? Who is that person? And in order to ask that question, I think we got to go way back to the very beginning. So who was little Bobby? Who was the little guy that just ran around? I'm assuming he ran around and caused a bunch of hate and discontent.
Absolutely, he did. And, for me, that origin story begins in the town of Erie, Pennsylvania, right up along the lake. And that's where I grew up. I didn't have a lot of advantages when I was growing up. Lived in public housing. and was raised by a single mother. As I tell the story, I say, she was a woman who really struggled in life, and she resolved that one of the best things that she could do is produce something that was good for the world, and that was me. And so, as I said, my upbringing was centered around that. Limited opportunity, poverty, public housing, and a woman who never told me what I needed to do with my life, only that I should do something that benefited other people. So I took on that responsibility, and I embarked on a law enforcement career, because that's how I decided I was going to serve.
Right.
And so I chose law enforcement as that profession, and embarked on that career that started with the military and continued for 30 years through retirement with the Pennsylvania State Police.
Right. So did you, as a kid, did you go in, like, were you playing sports? Were you active? Did you like to just sit and watch TV all day? What was your thing?
Well, it was a little of all that. The thing about growing up in the 70s and the 80s, and again, with not a lot of opportunity, I was heavily influenced by those 70s and 80s TV police shows, and the influence of that is kind of what started the desire to want to choose that as a profession. I was absolutely active outside all the time. I was an athlete, not a very big guy back then. So, running was a refuge for me, distance running. I was a runner with our track and cross country teams. So, all of those things were part of the desire to want to find the best way to serve my community. And so with that, it was law enforcement.
Yeah. So did you know that's what you wanted to do when you were getting into school and stuff like that? When you were in high school, did you know I'm gonna go into the military? Because you couldn't go right into being a police officer right out of high school. But did you say, I'm going to do the military, so that's going to lead me into that? Or were you kind of at that thing, like, I want to do something, and this looks as good as anything?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And, for me, the teenage years, the high school years were the determining years. And so the first influence was I got involved with a local police explorer post. That the exploring program sponsored by the Boy Scouts of America is a great program for people that are looking to start their interest in a particular career. And so the City of Erie Police Department had a law enforcement explorer post. It's essentially a club that you get together with other youth that have the same interests, and you learn about law enforcement. And so that was one of the main influences, one of the main guiding forces for me, when I was trying to decide what to do, and that pretty much solidified where I wanted to go with that. But as you said, college wasn't going to be an option for me, so I needed to find something. And for me, salvation was dressed in a military uniform, as with a lot of other high schools. When you have those career day kind of things, the military is a strong presence at those, and there was a Marine recruiter that said the right combination of words, and he called me up. He said, "What if I could offer you a spot in the military police in the fall of next year? Because you only need to be 19 to be a military policeman, but you had to wait till 21 to do it in the private community."
Right.
So I couldn't sign the contract fast enough to get me into law enforcement a full 2 years earlier.
That's cool. That's cool. And so it was the Marines that struck you. I mean, you could have gunned it. You can get gunned any branch, and you chose the Marines. Was beyond the fact that he had promised you military police, was there anything else besides that said, Marines are the ones I want to do? Or
come on, man. Come on. The uniform, the prestige, and everything else. I mean, look, I went through the career. I went through boot camp. I did the whole thing. Right. I have the appropriate amount of arrogance for a United States Marine, and there was no other. There was not going to be any other option. I couldn't see myself doing anything else. And it's not to say that being a member of any of the other branches of the armed forces was necessarily a bad thing, but that total package of the excitement, the action,
Yeah.
And not looking too shabby in that kind of a uniform was what definitely brought me in.
Right. Yeah. No, and I say that kind of, like I said, tongue in cheek, I guess, but I say that because the same thing happened to me. The Marine recruiter was at my school, and Sergeant Lattimore was his name, and he was the same way. And within months of meeting him and doing this, I was standing on those yellow footprints at San Diego. So that was, yeah. So I know exactly what you mean, and I'm only asking you that so I can verify myself, validate myself, but I know what you mean. So, so you go in there and it was actually, we talked to a lot of people who say, I was doing this and my recruiter promised me this, and then they didn't follow through. Apparently your recruiter did follow through, and the promises he made, they were able to do well for you.
Well, there's give and take. And, even at that age, I enlisted when I was 17. I needed my mother's permission. Of course,
Mm-hmm.
she was all for it as well. And even at that age, I realized that if you truly want to do something, you're going to have to give a little bit more of yourself to do that. And so to get that guarantee, the catch was I had to enlist for an extra 2 years. So I enlisted for 6 years of active duty right out of the chute. And, you got to give, you got to take,
Sure.
That's the way it goes.
And was it a good experience in the Marines for you?
Oh my goodness. Absolutely. It was a great experience. And again, I say, for a lot of people, when I tell my story with other people, I say, look, for a lot of people, the kind of accomplishments that I had in my career with the Marines, might be enough to satisfy somebody for their entire life. It was one of the best experiences that I could possibly relate to you, and we can talk kind of what I was able to do when I was in there, because the truth was that even achieving that goal of becoming a military policeman wasn't the best part of it. The best part of it was while I was in military police school, right in the middle of training, my basic training for law enforcement. I was very fortunate to be selected to be part of a special unit after I graduated. And that special unit was the unit that guards the helicopters that the President of the United States uses.
Oh, wow. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And so, the helicopter, the designation for that helicopter is Marine One.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody that's ever seen, a sitting president getting on and getting off of that helicopter, the green and white helicopter, they see Marines standing at the bottom of the stairs.
Right.
And there is a special unit that flies those helicopters, maintains those helicopters, and guards those helicopters that, is made up of a variety of different Marines, and they're specially selected. And I had the opportunity, as soon as I graduated from basic law enforcement school, to get assigned to that unit and start that part of my life.
That's pretty cool. So you were stationed primarily, I'm assuming, in Washington, D.C., but then you got to go to all these different places because of that?
Yes. I was stationed in Quantico, Virginia, which is just south of Washington. And so for 4 years, I traveled all over the country. I traveled all over the world in support of that mission, and worked for two great presidents. The timing was I caught the tail end of President Ronald Reagan's term of office, and
cool.
pretty much almost the entire term of office for President George H.W. Bush.
Wow, that's pretty cool. So was Reagan as my estimation as a cool of a character as he portrayed himself?
Without question, he absolutely was. And the thing about him and also his successor in President Bush was they were a different breed. They were the type of people that it didn't matter who you were. If you worked in that circle, they wanted to make sure that you knew that you mattered, and they always wanted to make sure that they were kind to you. And so I will always have fond memories of that.
That's cool. That's cool. You know, I recently read something where somebody said, and this is coming from that, I guess that ilk or whatever, and they were talking about the differences or similarities between Adolf Hitler and Churchill. And they said that whenever you would talk to, and people that had talked to both of them, they said when you talked to Hitler, you walked away feeling like that guy could do anything. He'd be able to do anything in his life. But then when you talked to Churchill, you walked away feeling that you could do anything, that you would be able to accomplish anything. And so that whole different mindset of their ego, of the whatever. And I always take, Churchill and Reagan and those guys of being that type that put others first and encourage others to be better, and they want to do it. And I'm assuming that's about their attitudes, correct?
Yeah, I would. That's the impression that I got. Now, and again, making sure that we're very clear. When you're a member of one of those units, it's not like you're having weekly
Right.
dinners with the leader of the free world. You are a part of the machine that accomplishes the mission. So it's fantastic. It's wonderful. You have the opportunity to peripherally, be caught up in that crazy lifestyle. But, when at the end of the day, when all the dust settles and everything else, you still have your job, and your job has nothing to do really with them. They're essentially, you're just supporting them.
Yeah. And I guess I'm just more talking about as far as a personalized issue, and as humans, who treat other people with respect, right, and things like that.
And he absolutely was. Both, like I said, both of them were. The interactions that I did have, occasionally with them, it was always a positive, great experience. If you felt like, you weren't in awe, but you felt like, gee whiz, at this moment in time, the presence that I have, this is going to be huge for me. This is a memory of a lifetime, just having the opportunity to meet somebody or interact with somebody that is of that quality.
Sure.
Of a person.
Yeah, and that's cool. And that's not something we all get. Some people don't get it all in their lifetime, and that's actually really pretty cool. So you go through your career in the Marines, and you go through all these different things, do different stuff that's cool, it's fun, it's not so fun, it's not so cool, whatever. And you decide that the end of your tour is coming up, that end of the 6 years. And I'm assuming you had the option to stay in if you wanted to, but you chose that you wanted to get out, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah. And all of that was based off of the fact that, I knew that I deep down inside, even if I was having these great opportunities to work as I did with Marine One, or a little bit later on in the Pentagon, still deep down inside, I knew that my goal in life was going to be to serve as a police officer in my community back home. And so I started that process while I was in the Marines, because it does take a while, as you know. It takes a while to actually go through the entire process to become a police officer.
Yeah.
And so I started that process, and was very fortunate that I was able to get into law enforcement virtually as soon as I got released from active duty.
That's really cool. So you had gone through all the testing, you'd done all the stuff while you were still in the Marine Corps.
Yes.
And then, so by the time you were getting out, you were able to say, I'm getting out, I'll be out on this day, and I can start on this day with Pennsylvania State Troopers.
Yes, exactly. And it was only, I had gone through all the testing process, as I said, when I was on active duty. And then I got released from active duty in early November, and reported to the academy in mid-March. So I was only home for a couple of months, and got the final confirmation of being hired and given a report date. And so it was only a few months, and went right into the State Police Academy.
That's cool. And so why did you choose the state police as opposed to a local department or a sheriff's office or?
Well, actually, that was one of those strange, and when I talk about my story, these strange twists of fate and timing are everything. I had actually missed the application window for the city police in Erie, which is where I wanted to go. I had missed the application window by just a couple of weeks because of being on active duty, and found out that the state police was hiring. So I fired a shot, to try to apply to that organization, and it was ultimately that organization that came through.
That's pretty cool. So you get in there so how does it work in Pennsylvania? Because every state seems to be different. You apply with the department and then they send you to the academy? Is it a state academy? Is it their own individual academy? How does it work?
Well, yeah, the state police in Pennsylvania are kind of the lead dog in the whole state as far as different things. And I'm not saying that to be bragging or anything, but we are. We actually do operate our own academy in Hershey, Pennsylvania, Chocolatetown, USA. So when you report to the academy, you are exclusively training with other cadets who are trying to be troopers, and you're taught by troopers. Everything is internal within that organization.
Right. And so you go. Do you have other departments that also go to that one, or is it specifically only the state police?
Right, and it's exactly right. There are other. The system is like a lot of other states. There are regional and municipal training academies. A few of the larger departments in Pennsylvania, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, have their own academies. People who want to work for the smaller departments in Pennsylvania get trained at one of those municipal academies. However, the state police, when you come to the state police academy, you're training to be a trooper.
That's pretty cool. And so you do that one. And how long is the academy there?
6 months.
6 months.
Yeah.
Is it live in like dorms, or do you get to go home, or?
Yeah, it is. It's a residential academy. That 6 months of training, you are, I joked that I went to jail for 6 months because it's pretty much you're a captive. You can't go home in the evening. You can't even go outside without permission. And it was pretty strict. As with every other academy, your curriculum is solely focused on law, the vehicle law, the criminal law. Yeah, it's focused on physical fitness, self-defense, all of the main parts of the curriculum. And there are a few other things as well, but that's pretty much how it goes.
Right. Do you get the chance to see how others do it or anything like that, or is it just you stay right there? You don't have any outside influence that you have to think about as far as other law enforcement or anything like that, or is it hey, we learn like this by talking to another department or another agency or another officer? Is just troopers, just Pennsylvania State Troopers?
That's it.
That's pretty cool.
That's it.
And did you have
by troopers? The academy itself is that 6 months, and then after you graduate the academy, that's when you start your field training process, where you're assigned to the different field training officers once you get to your barracks.
And did you have family at this time?
I did. I had my well, actually two. I'm sorry. my two daughters, and so I had a family.
So you got to miss them for 6 months?
Absolutely. And the academy was about 300 miles away from where I lived, and the other side of the state. And you had the opportunity on weekends to travel home, but that time was always cut short because of the the travel time involved, and having to get back in time to make curfew on Sunday evening.
Yeah, that's brutal.
It is very much so.
So you graduate the academy. Obviously, you didn't get failed out or anything like that. You do well, and you get to go back to where you lived. And
no, not necessarily.
No.
In at that time, and it still continues to this day. They modify the circumstances a little bit, but they take a position that you can be assigned anywhere in the state. When you work for a state agency this size, we had over 100 stations, and different office spaces all around the state. So you're pretty much assigned wherever they need you. And their rule was you could not go home to your local community where you're from for 3 years. So when they assigned you, you got assigned somewhere else. And then after that 3-year time frame, you were eligible to request a transfer back to your hometown.
Wow, that's kind of harsh. So your family was kind of at the whole idea is wherever it is they send you, we should expect to be moving upon graduation from the academy.
Yeah, and within a week,
Wow.
literally when you graduate, they give you a week to report to a brand new city that you've never even heard of before. And in that week's time, you probably, if you want to move, you're probably going to have to try to find a place, and it's there's a little scrambling involved, but it's all part of the experience.
Yeah, and when you're in your 20s, it's a little easier you haven't laid too many roots that you can, especially having been in the military, you've been all over the place, so it kind of makes it a little bit easier to be able to be more fluid and more
it does.
pliable, I guess would be the word.
Right.
So when you graduate, you start getting into the FTO phase, and you start going through all that. That worked out okay, and obviously you got through that quite well, or was that a little more difficult? Or
no, it was part of the process, and it was a steep learning curve. Certainly I had a little bit of experience with my time in the Marine Corps in law enforcement, but not the same type of policing that one would find in the local community. So there was a big learning curve, a little bit of a culture shock. In the Marines, in the military, there are different sets of rules for different classes of people: officer, enlisted, civilian. You treat each one differently based on that. In the civilian community, it's all the same. So that part of it was kind of challenging, and just learning your profession in doing it in practical application as opposed to just the classroom. And that was a very challenging part of it.
So as you get into it and you start learning all the different things that it takes to be the trooper that you are, did you start seeing where you wanted your career to go, or were you just, I say within the first 3 years, or were you just trying to learn the job and learn to do it right and do it well before you start thinking of these big career paths that you want to start following?
Right. The first couple of years, you're just trying to be the best patrol trooper that you could possibly be, and learn all of that. I certainly didn't have any idea as to what other specialized opportunities I might want to get involved in at that particular time. After a while, when you start to see that in a large organization such as the state police, there's so much diversity of opportunity available to you. You could branch into just about any kind of an occupational specialty that you want. And so after about 3 years, 4 years or so, you start to kind of come up with different ideas. You have the chance to have seen some of those different specialties in action. You've had chances to see criminal investigators doing their thing. You've had a chance to see, the SWAT team in action. You've had a chance to see just about any other thing that we did in action. And that's when it starts to plant the seed of maybe you want to get involved in that.
Right.
Right.
And so what were the ones you said, hey, that kind of interests me or whatever?
Well, and ultimately that's where the path I went down. I had the opportunity after 3 years to transfer from my first station. My first station was actually just outside the city of Pittsburgh. And so then I had an opportunity to transfer back to the Erie area in northwestern PA. And, there was the initial excitement of being able to be a policeman in my own community,
Right.
as I had always dreamed of being. But then after a while, you start to think about, well, okay, what's the next move? And so for me, the interest started with becoming a crime scene investigator. And so not a very pretty
right, not glamorous
line of work, but it was an amazing line of work to be involved in. At that time, the television shows, the crime scene, the CSI television shows were just starting to become popular. And so how cool is it to have the opportunity to go down that road and do the things that all of a sudden now everybody else is interested in.
Right, exactly. And especially the stuff that everybody's starting to take an interest, they're looking at, and they have kind of an idea how things work. Obviously those shows aren't 100% accurate, we get that, but there is that thing where people start saying, oh, hey, I have an idea about that. And then when they're able to see you doing it, or they get to know you, or you're going through it yourself, you start looking at it and you're doing it, and people can somewhat relate more than they can relate to, a patrolman from the TV show Chips, because that's not always the most accurate. But
Right.
Obviously we know the TV shows are not overly accurate anyways, but there is that some familiarization with things. And so you get onto crime scene investigation, and I'm assuming you saw all sorts of good, bad, and ugly in that.
I did, and all the excitement of driving fast cars and arresting people has that dark side too. And most days, you meet people on the worst day of their lives.
Right.
It may not be the worst day of your life, but it's the worst day of their lives. And when you start getting into those extreme cases and incidents where there's a critical incident, a homicide, some sort of a serious criminal act, not just the property damage or the dispute between neighbors, but a serious criminal incident. The stakes kind of go up, and
Right.
things get much more important to be able to find justice for a victim, or to solve a crime. And so even though the work itself had a kind of a downside to it, the excitement was actually being able to bring justice to a victim, or to solve a mystery, if you will.
Sure. Yeah.
And that was what was exciting about it.
Yeah, and that's a thing. People, I think we forget. Some people think that that's all we do is we're solving this crime or whatever, but sometimes we have genuine mysteries that you could, I guess, relate to, or almost compare to, like an old whodunit movie or whodunit TV show or something like that. And we're trying to figure out who these people are, and you're working off of nothing, maybe a little trail of something. And then when you actually get to solve this case, and it's not just where somebody stole $100 worth of stuff from Walmart, and now I'm got to try to figure out who it is based off of their video camera. No, there's levels of, I don't know who committed this crime, and the leads are super thin, and I may go for a long period of time without having any kind of break in that, and all of a sudden something comes up. Or there was a case that we had one time where it was a homicide, and the gun was missing. We knew we had a suspect, but he but he had this alibi, but the gun had gone missing. And so there's no proof. Well, this whole time goes by, the guy had kind of fled the state and done all this different stuff because we just didn't have enough because there was no gun. However, there's a bullet hole in our victim. Well, I'd say 6, 7, 8 months later, there was a big freeze that came across the area. And so some lady's pipes broke. Well, she went out to go and shut off the water and stuff like that, goes into the thing and finds opens up the thing for the water on like the sidewalk area and finds there's looks like a gun sitting in there. So she calls us, we go pick it up, we take the gun, we try to clean it up. It was all rusted and had tape on it and all this different stuff. Well, it turns out that 8 months later, the guy had run by that area, dropped the gun in there, but now we have the gun. And so it kind of worked out that just little breaks and things, because weather changes or because the world just continues to spin, we're able to make those little breaks. And it's actually pretty cool when something like that happens.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the ones that I will always remember for the rest of my life, we had a true whodunit homicide of an elderly lady, unfortunately. And it was an actual whodunit kind of homicide. We ultimately developed some leads because these people aren't very smart.
Right.
And so what cemented the case, and this man, if he's still with us, he will be in prison for the rest of his life without any opportunity for parole, based off of one hair that was recovered off of a bed sheet in the victim's house. One single hair put him in prison for the rest of his life without any chance of parole. And I'm not saying that to brag or boast or anything, but it was just the fact that our training, our skills, our focus, everything to that level was so on task that day that we were able to recover that one piece of evidence in a mountain of other evidence.
Right.
We were able to recover that one piece of evidence that absolutely solidified the opportunity to convict that individual.
Yeah, that's just a testament to what it is that we do and what the police do, is they have to look at everything and they're expected to know all these different things, and they're held to this higher standard based off of their training and all these different things that we have to do. And then we, as human beings that are doing the job, we've got to try to remember all of that stuff and go into it thinking, okay, what am I missing? And it's almost like when you stay at a hotel, before you leave that hotel, you're looking around, you're standing by the door with your luggage next to you and you're looking around the room. Am I forgetting anything? Well, that's kind of what we have to do at crime scenes. Stand back and, okay, what am I missing before I go home? I know I'm really tired. I'm hungry. I want to go see my family. I've got blah, blah, blah. But we owe it to these people, because some people, especially to, like you said, this elderly lady who was murdered. How do we honor them? Because their life was worth something. And so we need to honor their memory. We need to honor their family. We need to honor them. And so it's important that we look at those things. And I think sometimes people forget that we have to fine tooth comb things, and we are human, and it gets to us. It sometimes eats us from the inside out, but it's a testament to who we are and what we do.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And ultimately, with that particular phase of my career, that lasted about 6 years. And it got to a point, as you said, where when you're looking around and you realize that your whole life is about death. Your whole life is about these horrible, dire circumstances in other people's lives, and you need a break. you need to take a break from that, because it's starting to, when we talk about sacrifice, it's starting to consume parts of you. You start to become hardened to the world. You start to become a different person, because the exposure of that day in, day out is not something that the average human being is equipped to handle. and it becomes difficult.
Right. Right. And I don't think, and we don't sometimes realize that as we're getting into it, as we get into this line of work, and we get into the various, avenues we want to go through with our career. We forget that, hey, that looks cool. That looks really neat. Yeah, that's going to take a lot. Oh, I'm ready for it. Oh boy, I didn't realize there was that much. But we're resilient. Humans are resilient. We're able to push through that. So you did that for 6 years with crime scene investigation. What made you decide that, hey, I think I'm ready to try something else?
Well, again, as I said, when I just started to realize, look, I need to find something else that isn't affecting me like this is. So the next challenge came along. I had an opportunity for leadership. Again, a long career in the Marines. Everything in the Marines is stressed about, taking the next step in leadership, and certainly that had interest for me. So I had an opportunity to take a position in supervision, and moved back into the patrol unit as a supervisor. When you do that, you actually have to go where the job is. So once again, had to leave the family, had to move a little bit of a distance, and take a supervisor's position at a small mountain outpost style station in the middle north central part of the state, in a tiny little mountain town. What an exciting opportunity that was! It was a great 2-year adventure to start the next phase of my career in supervision as a leader.
Yeah. And did you like that? Was it what you thought it was going to be? Was it a big learning curve? What was your
it really wasn't much of a learning curve. And I say that because, again, the great thing about the military is that it does stress that from the moment that you step on the yellow footprints, they start ingraining in you this sense of becoming a leader. What is it to be a leader? And you always strive to be the best leader that you could possibly be. So what was really neat about that assignment was the fact that it was a smaller station. It was more laid back. It was very quiet. So you had an opportunity to ease into a leadership role. You didn't have as many people to supervise. You didn't have as many situations to deal with, and so it was a nice transition to get into leadership from there. And then after that assignment ended, I transferred back to the Erie area once again, and worked at a little bit of a busier station in the same job as a patrol unit supervisor. And that with that came more people, more incidents, more things to learn about your job as a supervisor, about taking care of your people, as opposed to just worrying about yourself.
Right. What's the big thing that Pennsylvania State Police do? Is it traffic? Is it crashes? Is it, what is the main focus for you guys?
Well, the interesting thing about Pennsylvania is it's a little different than a lot of other states. In other states, the state agency is either a highway patrol type of responsibility where they're exclusively on the interstate highways. And in other states, it's a little bit different where, the responsibility for policing in the county or the unincorporated areas of the state falls to, say, the county sheriff or a county police force. In Pennsylvania, the state police has responsibility for both. It has responsibility and essentially exclusive jurisdiction on the interstate highway system, but it also has jurisdiction in those unincorporated areas of the state. We don't have, our county sheriffs aren't like in other states where they have patrol responsibility. We don't necessarily have county police forces, all of those things. So any area that isn't covered by a local police department is under the jurisdiction of the state police. And so there's a lot of area to cover.
Right. Wow, that's different than what I guess I thought. So that's actually pretty cool. Now you're doing that. You're now closer to Erie as a supervisor. And what did you just do that, or did you have other collateral duties that you would do, such as any kind of, I don't know, any kind of ceremonial type responsibilities or anything like that?
Right, I did. And, again, because of the size of the agency and there's so many different opportunities, there are other activities that you can become involved in. And for me, there were two activities that I did part-time. In addition to my daytime responsibilities, there were two activities I did part-time that were important to me. One of those was I was a member of our department's ceremonial unit. That was our honor guard unit that performed different responsibilities, at ceremonial responsibilities at funerals, other ceremonies, special events, where we would either present the colors like you would see a traditional honor guard doing at, say, any sporting event where they're carrying the flags and the rifles and doing the ceremony. We would also be the pallbearers at department funerals for fallen troopers, for retired troopers, or local police officers if they didn't have their own honor guard. Our ceremonial unit would go and perform those functions. So that was one of the two part-time things that I got involved in. The other one was that I was involved in a youth camp.
Okay.
When I was a teenager, I was heavily influenced by the Explorer Post, that mentoring program, and so that was something that I felt I needed to carry on. And the state police has a youth camp program that they operate all around Pennsylvania that you can become involved in, and it's a summer camp atmosphere, kind of sort of like a boot camp, kind of sort of like a police academy for teens in that area to come and learn more about law enforcement. And so, again, because of the influences I had growing up, I felt like that was something else that I needed to do.
That's pretty cool that, you were able to kind of almost come full circle on that and go through it yourself and then be able to provide for it. And it wasn't so much, I'm asking, I guess, it wasn't so much of a punishment sort of thing. It was a way for these guys to get in, these guys and girls, I'm assuming, get in and see what it actually is without doing the job. So it's almost a recruitment, a early version recruitment, correct?
Yeah, you're exactly right. And there are hundreds of current and now retired, because the program has actually been the youth camp program that we've operated. It was called Camp Cadet. Okay. And it was an annual summer camp. And that program has actually been in existence for 50 years. So there are active and now retired troopers who were, as teenagers, cadets at the local Camp Cadet program, and were influenced to continue on down that road when they left the camp and resumed their normal teenage life.
That's pretty cool. And is there a rate in which the majority of the kids that go through that actually become troopers, or police officers in general, or is it just a one and done sort of thing for the most part?
Well, I don't know that you can necessarily, we don't have data, let's just put it that way, on the number. I would say there is a large number of people who then went on to some sort of a professional career, whether that was in police, whether that was in the military, whether that was in the private sector, in anything that they did. I can tell you that I believe that mentoring program was a strong influence in the lives of a lot of youth that never became law enforcement, but went on to a successful life in whatever they did, because of the influence that program had. It was only a single week. It wasn't like a club like the Exploring Post was, but it had enough of an impact on a lot of those individuals that, they saw it as a source of inspiration for becoming successful.
Right. And you did it then. Do you do it now? Do you still work with them?
No, actually, I did that for 25 years.
Wow.
And then shortly after I retired, I retired from that as well. But I was a member of the Camp Cadet staff for my entire 25-year career.
That's pretty cool. And so do you have kids coming up, or I guess adults now, come up to you and say, oh yeah, you ever have to get that going on?
Oh yeah, I've been bushwhacked a bunch of different times, and it's always at the time you're not expecting it, that somebody recognizes you. They never forget you. It's like drill instructors in the Marine Corps. The second you see them, you might not have seen them for 25 years, but the second you see them, your blood runs cold, and
it takes you right
you start
back.
having these weird experiences. But you do. You regularly. I have now adults. Some of them are even in their 30s. And I have these young, these adults come in, and a couple of them actually came on with the state police after the fact, and so they remember me from back in the day, and that's great.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. And obviously, that's the majority of that come up to you it's all positive. It's all positive, I guess, memories they have, and thanking you for putting time into them and stuff like that.
Yeah, it is. It's absolutely positive. I've never had anybody come up to me and want to fight me because of something I said to them or something I made them do, extra push-ups or whatever. And that's a good thing.
Yeah.
But I really do. Some of those people went on to amazing lives, and I'm really proud of having the opportunity to be a part of a program like that.
That's really cool. That's really cool. So you are working in all these kind of side things, and you're doing all this sort of stuff. There's at some point you started getting into training and doing whether defensive tactics or whatever. Tell us about that. How did that kind of come about?
Yeah. And so what was funny is again, when you're starting to try to find your way through things and you find the interest in things, I had been involved in doing teaching when I was in the military.
Mm-hmm.
I had started to become involved in that, and it was another one of those. I wasn't looking for it, but hey, I kind of like this. I'm kind of good at this, and so I'm going to continue to try to pursue that. And so, eventually, with my time in the state police, again as a supervisor, I'm doing the job for several years, getting all of that experience and everything. And then another opportunity presents itself to move into a training position. It's something that I had interest in. I had pursued, but wasn't successful in getting one of those jobs earlier in my time with the state police. And so the opportunity came up. I was successful in getting a position as a trainer. And so then I moved into the training unit. Now, all trainers with the state police are expected to possess a wide variety of knowledge in police-related topics, pretty much anything. If you're going to be a teacher, you're going to teach criminal law, you're going to teach vehicle law, you're going to teach physical fitness, you're going to teach a variety of different things, but eventually you begin to specialize. And so when you're doing that full time and you're starting to specialize, my specialties became officer safety, physical fitness, and self-defense. Those were the things that were of interest to me off the job. I was very active. I was physically fit. I loved fitness. As I said, when I was growing up, I was an active runner. That crazy running lifestyle continued for my entire life. I was a distance runner. I had run marathons and half marathons and 10Ks and 5Ks and every other kind of K you could think of. So being physically fit and being involved in that was appealing to me. Doing that with the state police was something that was just a natural fit. In addition to that was defensive tactics, self-defense.
Mm-hmm.
Off the job, I was an avid martial artist. I was involved in traditional karate And again, right at the very origins of the popularity of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I got involved with that, albeit later in my life. Why does one who's over 40 all of a sudden interested in getting involved in something as crazy as Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? Not the mixed martial arts style, but traditional Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And so got involved in that as well. And so those were natural fits for me in the training side of things, that I couldn't believe that most days they were actually giving me a paycheck to go for a run. They're giving me a paycheck to go back into the gym and roll around on the mat with someone else. I couldn't believe that most days I had the opportunity to do that.
Right. So did you, what was that when you trained, or when you were in training, did you just do that, or did you have to go do patrol also? Or was it just, I just go to the training center and we train the cadets and the new guys and the troopers throughout?
Right. It was a full-time position. And when I started out with that, I was still in the Northwestern Pennsylvania area. We had a regional training center there. And so with that regional training center, our primary responsibility was doing what is known as in-service training. You're teaching active road troopers, not cadets. You're teaching active troopers a variety of different things. And then over time, they'd start to bleed in municipal police candidates, and we would be involved with training cadets. And then ultimately, I had an opportunity to go and take a transfer to a position at our state police academy. And then it was all exclusively training cadets. And that was the exciting part.
And it was just the coolest part, where you got to train, and that was what you were doing.
That was it. That was it. And I said, when I wasn't teaching a class, I was developing new training for different things, designing classes, new classes that police officers all around Pennsylvania could come and take. And not just state police, but municipal police officers as well. Anybody could sign up and take one of my classes, and you would put classes on the training calendar that had relationship to your specialty. And so, as I said, for me, my specialties were self-defense, physical fitness, and officer safety. So I would frame my new classes that I would design around those.
That's pretty cool. So, just on a side topic, what was the name of the style for a karate?
It was.
Oh.
Are we clear?
And
just so you remember.
Yeah. So, what was the style of karate that you do, or you did?
Well, the traditional style of karate was called Goshin Jitsu karate. Okay. Did that for just a short amount of time, but then moved exclusively full time to pursuing the art of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and it was fantastic.
That's pretty cool. Pretty cool. I had a guest several episodes ago. He's the director of the Traditional Karate Do Federation International, which studies Shito-ryu, and so okay. I've been working with them for, going 10 plus years now. So it's actually pretty fun. So anyways, I want to kind of move into the next phase of this. We've kind of got a whole idea of where you came from and what you've been doing, and how you're just loving your career. And I want to get into a day that you'll remember, and it happened along mile marker 121 at Interstate 81 in Pennsylvania. And I'm assuming you know exactly where this is at, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. And it's not something that's ever going to be gone from your thought process. And I'm going to read a little something from the book here that you talk about. And so I've got a couple different portions I'm going to read really quick, but we'll get into it, and I'll let you kind of just flesh this whole thing out. So Fraternity. I like to use the word instead of using brotherhood, although they both describe a close association of a group of people. Ignoring images of Animal House for a moment, I believe that fraternity implies a greater sense of membership and obligation to look after one another. And keeping that in mind, I want to read a portion here. That Friday morning started normal enough, up at 6 a.m. for a run on the hotel treadmill, a short 2-miler. It would be the last training run on my schedule in preparation for participation in the Love Run, a half marathon on the streets of Philadelphia, set for that Sunday. I remember the weather and road conditions were pretty good, and I was making great time. Being familiar with the route for many trips to the Northeast, I knew approximate driving times along the way. Heading south on Interstate 81, I called my wife to discuss our weekend plans and the race in Philadelphia. As I neared the exit of the town of Frackville, I let Tracy know that I would be home in about an hour. Hanging up the phone was the last thing I remember. So what happened on Interstate 81?
Well, it's absolutely true. That was the last thing I remember, because anything that I could share with you from that point going forward, I've actually had to learn from speaking with the witnesses and the first responders to the incident. Amnesia is a very real thing, and you set the tone quite well about that day. That morning, I was in the town of Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. I was preparing to teach a group of Wilkes-Barre police officers about the dangers of citizens who have extremist anti-government views. That was a class that I had actually developed earlier, and the demand for that class was growing, and to the point where I was kind of on a traveling road show. I was teaching all around Pennsylvania, around surrounding states, and that class was in high demand. And so on that day, I had finished up that class and began traveling back to Hershey along Interstate 81. As I said, the road and weather conditions were pretty good for the end of March. This was March 27th of 2015, and I was making great time. But as you know, when you're in an unmarked police car, you always make great time.
Right.
And that day was no different. But getting back to mile marker 121, I had observed a vehicle on the side of the road that was on fire. The statements of the first responders, the official crash report says that I stopped my vehicle along the berm of the roadway behind the vehicle that was on fire. The evidence shows that I got the fire extinguisher out of the trunk of my car, and that I was walking along the guide rail with the disabled vehicle's operator, the vehicle that was on fire, and the lights went out. Smoke from the fire was getting out into the roadway, and vehicles that were approaching the scene were hitting their brakes and performing crazy steering maneuvers to avoid running into one another. An SUV driven by a woman from Virginia swerved to avoid hitting another vehicle, and she lost control. Traveled off the roadway. She struck a guide rail. She continued along the berm, and she struck the back end of my unmarked police car. My car then went forward and hit both myself and the disabled vehicle's operator, causing him minor injuries and causing me significant life-threatening injuries at the time.
Wow. And so that whole thing happens, and you don't remember things leading up to that point. You don't remember being with the guy or...
No, I mean, and again, like I said, amnesia is very real. I have no memory of the incident from about 5 minutes before the crash occurred to about 24 hours later, when I woke up in the hospital experiencing what I'm sure everybody would agree to be one of those crazy, chaotic moments where you're trying to figure out what the heck happened to you.
Right.
So almost a full 24 hours went by before I started to remember what was going on.
And so when you did start remembering, where were you at? What were you looking at? What were you seeing? What were you feeling?
I have no idea. Like, as I said, hanging up the phone was the last. I have no ability to recall what took place in that time, that 5 minutes before leading up to when the lights went out. I've got no memory of that. It hasn't come back in the nearly 7 years since the incident. And anything that I've been able to learn about what happened has actually had to come from speaking with people and reading the reports. When I woke up in the critical care unit at the hospital, tubes in me. I couldn't even speak. I had a tube down my throat. The realization that I had been badly injured was starting to sink in. My wife, some coworkers were there, and they were trying to tell me that I'd been involved in an accident. When you hear that for the first time as a police officer, it's terrifying. The first thing you think about when you hear that is, oh my gosh, did I hurt somebody?
Right.
And so imagine my relief when I'd been kind of given a breakdown of what the circumstances of the crash was, that I got hit by a car. And folks, it sucks to get hit by a car. As I like to joke, it sucks more when it's your own car. I actually got hit by my own car. And so when my loved one, my coworkers were starting to draw this picture for me, I was actually kind of relieved that I wasn't involved in an actual moving collision with another vehicle, as we all think, and that's the worst. That's the worst thing that could happen to a police officer.
Yeah. Was it just like confusion? Was it just this whole like, what is going on? I have no idea. Why am I laying down in this bed? What are these tubes? All this different stuff.
It was a very I mean, I don't have any memory of the accident itself. So that life-threatening, experience isn't the scary part for me. The scary part for me was when I was starting to realize how badly I had been injured. I still had no concept of how badly I was hurt. I was in and out of consciousness. I was, again, I was unable to speak. I was unable to move. And we can talk about my injuries here in a second, but I was unable to move. I was in critical condition, and I couldn't understand why. And so when they started to paint the picture for me, things started to become a lot clearer. It was still a terrifying moment in my life.
Yeah, that's got to be, just like I said, just confusing and scary, and you're trying to figure out, did I do something wrong? How do I fix this? And because I think even as guys, we look at things like, okay, I see an issue and I got to go fix that, because that's what we got to do. We got to fix it so it's back on this straight plane or whatever. And that just wasn't an option for you. And even if it was, to try to do that, it was going to be a long road ahead of you, I'm assuming, correct?
Yeah, and as you said, the thing is about control. What every man wants to have complete control and over their themselves and what they do in their world. And for police officers, even the control that you need to have over any given situation is the first priority. So being totally vulnerable, totally at the mercy of everybody else, and not having a single ability to do anything yourself is and was one of the most scary parts of this entire experience, was being so totally vulnerable that I had no idea what was going to happen next.
Right.
It was pretty significant.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I can't even imagine, I think. And that whole idea where you've spent this whole 20, 30 years doing stuff for other people, and now everybody has to do something for you. you're strong, you're healthy, you're active, you're doing all these things, you're preparing for a marathon, and all of that is now gone. And what were you looking at when you started taking an assessment of yourself from your toes all the way up, and you start looking at all the different things that they're telling you that you've got? What was your assessment on that when you start learning of all your injuries?
Well, yeah, I mean, and that was the first part of it, was that there was still a lot of uncertainty. What they did know at the time, was that I had sustained some pretty critical injuries. The most serious injury was to my L1 vertebra, which was completely crushed and led to what's known as an incomplete spinal injury. I had spinal cord damage. My left femur was badly broken. My left lung had collapsed. The ligaments in my left shoulder were torn. My left hand was badly broken. The impact with the ground by my head was so severe that it actually damaged the optic nerve, resulting in permanent vision loss in my left eye. So there were a lot of, serious injuries that they were telling me about as things were going on, that I was having to process. Mm-hmm. And your thoughts immediately, because you're this crazy service-driven person, you're taking inventory of all of that, but you're also, thinking about, hey, I got to get back to work. When am I going to get back to work? Right. And, okay, this is bad, but what do I got to do to get myself back to work? That was the crazy thoughts that were going through my head at the time. Mm-hmm. It was scary, because you're like, well, maybe this is the end of the line, but it's not the end of the line, because I got to get back to work. So right. That was the kind of stuff that was going on through my head at the time.
And I'm assuming the state police were supportive of you to a certain extent.
Oh my gosh, yes. All of the things, in when you read that section of the book, that fraternal support, it presented itself in so many ways in the minutes, hours, days, weeks, months after my injury. And I spend a great deal of time talking about that when I share my story about that show of fraternal support, that brotherhood, if you will. Mm-hmm. And the way that it presented itself. And the very first way that it presented itself was in the way that the leadership of the academy where I was assigned at the time, that leadership had to gather themselves when they first got word that I'd been involved in this critical life-threatening event, that they gathered themselves together, and they had to do that one thing that we all come to regret, and that's the knock on the door. And those guys did an amazing job going to my house calmly, professionally, gathering up my wife, my young son at the time, and then taking them to the hospital to be by my side. And all of those people, a small army of troopers from the academy, from surrounding stations, were waiting at the hospital for the helicopter to arrive, because they took my family. Hershey is a suburb of Harrisburg. Our department headquarters is in Harrisburg. So they took my family, they delivered them to the care of the commissioner of the Pennsylvania State Police and one of the deputy commissioners. And then they put my family on a helicopter for the ride to the hospital, which was a fair distance away. And when they landed, there was already a small army of troopers waiting for them when they arrived. And all of those people stayed by my family's side throughout the night and for the next several days, providing guidance and support in a way that most people don't understand.
Wow, that's really cool.
And so, continuing that same thing, as I was starting the process of recovering, healing, hospitalization, all the medical treatment I was going through, I was ultimately transferred from the first hospital that I was taken to 2 weeks later to a rehabilitation hospital here in Hershey, where I would spend the next 42 days in undergoing intensive physical therapy, occupational therapy, and everything else. And so, in over-the-top fashion, those those officers, those troopers from the state police went with me, and that show of fraternal support, that brotherhood, again presented itself in so many ways. Leaving one hospital and changing locations was just a change in location. That fraternity went with me. I broke the rehab hospital record for visitors. If you had a short haircut, or if you looked even the slightest bit official when you came into the main entrance of the hospital, before you could even go up to the desk to ask, you were greeted with he's in room 1012 before you could even ask. And so it was that kind of show of support that went with me throughout the entire experience.
And that's pretty cool. And in the book, you have a bunch of pictures. You got pictures of the crash scene. You've got pictures of you before the crash, and then you've got pictures of at the hospital when you got there, and there was an honor guard there to greet the ambulance when you arrived. And then obviously you have a bunch of pictures of your rehabilitation, you getting through, and all the different contraptions you had to wear in order to get back to being able to be upright and move and do all these things. And then you have some pictures that follow that. And so what I'd like to do is kind of start gearing and veering towards that area in which your recovery became the story that you like to tell on how to continue and grow even through adversity. So kind of guide us through that whole thing of where your story goes from your recovery on.
Okay. And so again, I was hospitalized for a total of 55 days before I was able to be on my own, as it were, to continue my recovery efforts back home. Mm-hmm. With that intensive physical therapy, there were several surgeries that went along with that to get me to the point where I could go from lying flat on my back to tolerate being able to sit up, to tolerate being able to stand, to being able to walk again. Mm-hmm. And to walk with the aid of a walker at first, and then ultimately I walk with the device that they call forearm crutches, with the aid of braces. And so going from one assistive device to another assistive device, to being able to function at home. And the most important part of that was certainly the role reversal, where as the husband and the breadwinner and the caretaker and everything else, to have to reverse those roles to the point where now I had to be taken care of by my family. Right. And that was a going down that road. And so I went home after 55 days. I continued my rehabilitation at home. Everything along the way was focused on getting back to a full duty status at work. Everything was about full duty. Whatever you got to do, get me to the point. And I still really didn't have, I don't know that I necessarily accepted the permanence of my condition. Still thinking that I'm going to be able to get through this. A lifetime of sports-related injuries, a lifetime of martial arts injuries. You naturally assume you'll go to a little physical therapy and you're going to be back. And ultimately that wasn't going to happen, but I still went throughout every day focusing on that. When I got discharged from the hospital, I was home for the weekend, and I went back to outpatient physical therapy 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. It was like a job, and everything was about getting back to full duty. It was, in my way of thinking, I needed to be able to get to a kneeling position so I could I could go through the firearms qualification process so that I could qualify with my firearm and get cleared to go back to full duty. Even though I have paralysis in my feet, and that has not improved in 7 years. It's always going to be there. So, that was the focus of the next several months. And I was able to go back to work in a limited capacity in November of 2015. So from March to November, I was out and recuperating. I was able to go back in a limited capacity to where I was a sergeant, a supervisor of a training unit within the academy. I could go back to my desk job,
Right.
and I could, with help of crutches, I could stand in front of a classroom full of people and still communicate information. But I was still limited in what I could do. But I could actually go back to that. I actually was able to start driving a car without the need of any kind of specialized equipment. So that meant that I could rejuvenate my teaching career, traveling around in teaching.
Right.
So, I was able to do that starting in November of 2015, and I continued that through all of 2016. But as I was going through 2016, I started to realize that the improvement that I was seeing wasn't going to be of the quality that I was going to be able to get to that full duty status. The cool thing about it is that when I got hurt, I had 22 years on the job. Now I'm getting closer and closer to a normal retirement. And for me, it was important to take a normal retirement as opposed to a disability retirement.
Right.
I didn't retire because I had to. I retired because I wanted to. We all work throughout our whole lives with our eyes toward that retirement. And so my decision, although it was a tough one, my decision was that I would retire from the state police in January of 2017. And I did that.
You did it on your terms. You did it the way you wanted to do it. And nobody can say that, oh, he got kicked out, or you can even tell yourself, nope, I did what I started out wanting to do and I finished it on my terms. And I think that's huge. That's fantastic, because there's some people that get injured, they don't have that option. Especially what you're saying is the extent of your injuries. That was there's so much there, and some guys don't get that opportunity.
And that's absolutely true. And for me, when I made the decision to retire, it was a very, very peaceful decision. I had no intentions. Had I not been injured, I would likely still be working for the state police. I'm still somewhat a young guy at 53 years old, 47 when I got hurt. But had I not gotten injured, I would still be working for the state police, still doing that crazy thing. My thinking leading up to this, my whole goal was full duty. That somehow, if I failed to achieve full duty, that I would somehow be considered, my efforts would somehow be considered a failure. And I was absolutely wrong. And it took a while to figure that out. I was absolutely wrong. The real victory in my story came on January 13th of 2017, when I retired from the Pennsylvania State Police after a full 25-year career. That was the victory in my story. And on that day, as a final, kind of what you were saying, on my own terms, a final way of leaving on my own terms, I actually stayed at the academy right up until 4:00 in the afternoon, although all of the other people that worked at the academy left 2 hours earlier to get a head start on my retirement party. And that's exactly the way that I wanted to do it, because as I shared, everything up to that point was celebrated in these over-the-top fashions with lots of the troopers around showing their fraternal support. And I had one more thing that I needed to do that I didn't want to share with anybody except my family. So at 4:00 that day, while the academy was basically empty, I came to the front door. Again, as I explained, I walk with the aid of crutches and braces and things like that. But I had recovered, and the physical therapy had got me to the point where, for just a short distance, with the aid of those braces, I like to call it toddler walk.
Uh-huh.
Without any kind of support, I could toddler walk. And so in March of 1993, I walked through the front door of that state police academy on my own 2 feet to start my career. And on January 13th of 2017, at 4 o'clock, I actually walked 10 feet through that door, out that door, to end my career as a police officer on my own 2 feet. And it was a wonderful, very emotional experience for me to be able to do that on my terms.
That is so cool. You almost got me misty in here thinking about that. And that's what I think, that we miss things of that nature. Everything is so go, go, go. Everything is so just do whatever. With social media and all this junk, we forget those nuanced things that really hold weight and they have a lot of gravity to them. That idea that you had on your own 2 feet, on your own, under your own power, on your own decision-making skill, decided I'm going to walk through this door and I'm starting a career as a state police officer, and then going through all the stuff you go through, and then the good, the bad, the junk, everything else, and making it back through across that threshold on your own 2 feet, saying I've come full circle and I'm ready to start a new chapter. We miss the gravity of those things. That's such an important factor in life, that we as a society, as in the world that we live in, that we don't think of the importance of minimal things that hold a personal message and hold personal meaning to each one of us. We're so worried about, impressing or doing something for somebody else, or, just getting things done, that we miss the ritual. We miss the spiritual side of things, especially that. And whether or not you go to church or whatever, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about there's a bottom line that we don't look at too often anymore. And when you tell the story that you do about going across the threshold just now, that really holds some weight. And I really enjoy that. I really like that story, even though it took 30 seconds for you to tell. That is fantastic. And I'm
well, as the old newsman Paul Harvey used to say, there's the rest of the story that goes with that as well. And then when I share that, the other significant part of that day, that was absolutely an emotional moment for me. There were a lot of tears. I get choked up when I tell the story, because there were a lot of tears that day. And, hugging my wife, my then 13-year-old son, who just turned 20 years old 2 days ago. But he, there was a lot of emotion just in that moment on those academy stairs at that front door. And then we jumped in the car. We went down the hill. Directly across the street from the academy, appropriately located, is a brewery, and that's where my party was held. And so when I walked into my retirement party after just having this emotional moment, I walked into the cheers of my family and friends who were there, and somebody said something over my shoulder, and I turned a little too quickly to see who it was, and I fell down in front of everybody.
Oh.
And so I just had this big triumph, this big triumphant moment just a few minutes before that. And now I'm laying on the floor looking up at my friends, thinking about how my life sucks. And that was another lesson in my story, drawing on all the strength that I have received from my difficult upbringing in my life, the things that I learned how to persevere in my early life through difficult circumstances, all of the things that I learned as a Marine, all of the things that I learned in the 25 years with the state police, and all of the things that I had learned in the final 22 months of my career as a state trooper, I did the only thing that I could do. I got up. You fall down. That's all you can do.
Yeah.
When you fall down is get up. You could lay there and you could think about how your life sucks. You could think about all of the things that led you to that point, and you could just resign yourself to the fact that this is how I'm going to be now. Or you can just get up. And then that's what I did. And we had a great party. It was a fantastic party, and it was a great way to close out a law enforcement career. Not the falling down part, but
Right.
the getting up part. And so, it was a wonderful way to do that. And that was the very first lesson for the next chapter of my life, after the state police, in perseverance.
And tell us about that. Tell us about the next chapter, the things that you've done since, where it's not all internal and going on, buying an RV and going cross country, or, just going on vacations. What is the?
Well, of course, no, you can't turn it off. You can never turn it off. I mean, some people are wired that they never want to go back to that life. And they can, get the RV, they can sit on the beach and drink, cold beers and things, but I'm not wired that way. And I am not. And so I decided almost immediately that it was going to be important for me to share this story of perseverance with the world. And so that's the idea of the book. The Forged in Scars and Stripes, A Trooper's Victory Over Critical Injury, was that journal of the final 22 months of my career as a trooper, because I felt like it needed to be told. And so the cool thing about the book, I'm not kidding you. I retired on a Friday. On that Monday, I threw my laptop in my backpack. I went to the local coffee shop like all the kids do, and I started working on it. Prior to retirement, the idea had been floated to me by my good friend who was the Pennsylvania State Police Department psychologist, Dr. Mike Askin. Fantastic guy. We had collaborated on a lot of things while I was at the academy. He was assigned to the academy as the department's psychologist, and he was very active in my recovery. And so one of the things that he did was he floated the idea of writing the book. So I brought him into the book with me. I wrote the chapters of the book that expressed the emotions of what I was going through, and then Dr. Askin would take that chapter as I would finish it, and he would put the psychological spin to the emotions that I was expressing. And so the book itself has actually become was very effective because it grew that way.
Yeah, and you mentioned him, I don't know how many times in the book, and various things. And one of the things that he wrote in the book, it's entitled Emotional Debrief with Dr. Askin. It says, Bob recounts the journey that helped shape him, his values, and his future. Despite the disadvantages of his early years, he recognized, appreciated, and used the lessons given him by those who cared about him. As importantly, he kept an open mind, and attentive one, that allowed him to see and grasp opportunities that could have easily been dismissed, minimized, or ignored. That openness not only helped him overcome the impoverished circumstances of his youth, but later also overcome the seemingly insurmountable circumstances of his catastrophic injury. Awareness, acceptance, and motivation are great tools for constructing one's response to challenge. And that's just one little paragraph that he writes in here. And he, goes through various areas that he talks about. And like you said, he kind of fleshes out the other side. You're talking about the physical and how you're being affected, and he's able to explain, oh, here's why that's happening, or whatever, I guess in more of a psychological term.
That's true. And, I think having the book written in that format was one of the best parts of this. The recovery side of things, writing the book, putting my emotions down, telling the story and putting it down in printed form. It took several months, of course, to write the book. It took another several months to rewrite the book.
Right. Yeah.
But that was all very, very much a part of my recovery is being able to figure out what that event meant to me, to my life, and how the lessons learned can translate into that message of perseverance, and where I was going to go after that. Because as I said, I had no intentions of retiring, but and I struggled for many months with the decision to retire. But once a few people clued me in on some of the reasons why I could retire, that made all the difference in the world. And so, what do I do from here? Where do I go from here? Well, as I said, I wrote the book, but I also knew that I needed to stay connected to law enforcement training in a way that was going to be beneficial to others. And so, one of the things that I got involved in right from the very, as soon as I retired, was starting to teach others about the dangers of hazards out on the highway. And so I became involved with teaching about traffic safety in and around Pennsylvania, using my story, my message, the lessons, things that I could have done better in that situation, and how they should not be like me in doing some of those things that that became a big part of that. I got involved with legislative change in Pennsylvania, improving the language and the law as it relates to slowing down and moving over for emergency responders. And so being involved in the legislative changes, again, using my experience as as a part of that, became very important. So in the years since retirement, I've been active with that. I've been active in staying connected to law enforcement training in other aspects. But then the biggest discovery of where I needed to go came from my experience of working with an organization called the Wounded Blue.
And that has been, that word is that term has been used on the show before. A couple episodes ago, I had Randy Sutton on, and he is, if I'm not mistaken, the president of the Wounded Blue. And he kind of talked about that. So tell us what you get to do with the Wounded Blue.
Well, Randy's the founder of the Wounded Blue. He's and I hope that everybody that's that listened really understood that they were hearing somebody who was very compassionate and very driven to improve the lives of injured and disabled officers everywhere. And so my part of that was, in my experience during my recovery, I had discovered that connecting with other survivors of critical injury or illness was something that I don't think most people truly can understand, the level of connection that you can make with somebody else who's been in a similar situation as you, has survived what you survived. You can benefit from what's known as peer support,
right?
Where people can counsel you, they can talk to you, they can be there for you, they can do all those things. But if they've never themselves survived, it's kind of hard to put yourself in their shoes, and to connect with them in a way that they understand. And so, for me, making those connections with other survivors of critical injury or illness, and over the course of my recovery, I was able to do that. I was able to meet other state police personnel who had survived their own injuries and illnesses and things before I did. And so they were able, you talk about mentorship, they were able to mentor me, to be able to connect with me on that level, to share personal, failures, personal, very, very personal issues that they were still going through, and being comfortable sharing that information. You can connect with a peer. You could tell your buddy, about things that they're going on in your life, but there's still certain things that are off limits.
Right. Right.
And so it's amazing what you could share when embarrassment's off the table. and so connecting at those deepest levels, and when you have a bad day, knowing that you can pick up that phone and you can call another person who will understand without question
Or
what
judgment.
you're going through,
Yeah.
is absolutely critical. And so, having had those experiences in my recovery, I knew that if I was going to go forward, that I needed to be a part of that. I needed to be able to do that on a bigger level. And so, a couple of years ago, right when it was at its founding stages, I was able to connect with Randy Sutton, and talk with him and explain to him, what I was feeling, what I was going through, and what I wanted to be a part of. And he allowed me to come into the organization. One of the things, the strengths, the skills that I bring to that organization was training, and realizing that a lot of the problems, the struggles, the obstacles that injured and disabled officers experience when they try to go back to work.
Right.
First of all, no one goes through this alone. The stories of the problems that these injured officers encounter when they're trying to go back to work, they're not unique. They may be unique to that individual, but they are absolutely not unique. So many officers experience hardships because they want to go back to work. They experience things that will make the average person, if they knew the truth, that would make the average person angry, sad, horrified that our public servants, the people that swore an oath to serve, are being treated in a poor way. So what I've realized, and that's what I shared with Randy, and that's the strengths that I bring to the organization, is that a lot of those issues are directly tied to the fact that leaders ascend several rungs of the leadership ladder and may never have had the experience of having an injured officer under their command. And if they've never had an injured officer under their command, when that happens, they may not necessarily know the right way to deal with that person. If they don't have the experience, then the only thing that they could potentially fall back on when it does happen is training. And what training currently is offered to leaders in law enforcement about dealing with injured officers or ill officers under their command? There really isn't any.
Yeah, it boils down to HR stuff and what your different state laws indicate in regards to that. Yeah.
100% correct. And so when you talk about involving insurance companies, involving administrative people, HR, local politics, whatever you start to insert in the equation, that individual officer who sacrificed so much for that organization basically becomes a dollar sign. They basically become a commodity that is no longer useful. And so the problem then becomes about finding that balance, finding that value in that individual, allowing that individual to continue to get value from their career, but allowing that agency to get the most value out of that individual.
Right. What I notice is that there's the military has the VA, but law enforcement, they don't necessarily have a VA. It's not like we have this. And so cities, counties, states, they have only so much money coming in from taxpayers or taxes or whatever, however they get their funds. And so they're actually trying to operate with that budget, and they're not taking, there's not that thought, because it's not always so prevalent. Like with the VA, people come back with horrific wounds. I mean, that's the whole idea, but there's no VA for law enforcement. And so I don't think it's this intentional, well, we're going to screw you over. I think it's just this idea that, more often than not, people retire under their own power, and they go on to go do what they do, and thank you for your years of service, and enjoy your happy, healthy retirement.
And there's that expectation, and in most cases, there's that expectation. You get catastrophically injured, we're gonna send you off into that good night with all of the pomp and circumstance that goes with that. We're gonna thank you for your service, give you that gold watch, and send you on your way. But what they don't realize is that there are some people who still want to continue to serve.
Right.
And now they're not being allowed to do that. And as you said, it goes from, there's a transformation that takes place. It goes from that show of fraternal support that we've got your back. If there's anything you need, we're going to be with you.
Mm-hmm.
To, we're sorry about your luck, but there's nothing we can do.
Right.
And as Randy says in his own personal story, how do you say to an individual, it's nothing personal, it's just business? And that's the part of this that becomes the mission. That's the part about this that becomes necessary to change the treatment to those officers. And so back around to where I come in for this, when Randy and I were having our discussions at the early stages of the Wounded Blue, we were talking about the need for education. And so we created a workshop that deals with that void of training that's not there in law enforcement, to bring attention and awareness to these issues that officers are experiencing. And so, Randy brought me in, and I was very fortunate to be a part of this organization because I had received the benefit of peer counseling. I chose to become a peer counselor, and took on that responsibility within the organization of the Wounded Blue. And in addition to that, to help with training other people by creating an educational workshop on these issues geared towards leadership, because I think it's a very real need to educate law enforcement officers and command staff and policymakers, decision makers, everybody that's involved with this as to what is out there. Because again, as I said, how do you say to somebody, I'm sorry, I appreciate your sacrifice, but now that's all for you now because I can't use you.
Right. And it's not that they don't like them anymore personally. They may still be their friends, and but there's nothing, because they're not the ultimate, decision maker. There's a lot of decision makers out there. But the other side of it is this shows that these guys aren't alone, that these people are not alone, that you are not going through this by yourself, that there's other people and that they want to support each other. And like you talked about fraternity, there's that order of being able to come alongside other people and make sure that they know that you're still valued, you're still valuable. You, through that organization, maybe not, because you can't do the job they need, but you're still valuable to them personally, maybe to the administrator who is your friend or whatever. Personally, you still have value to your family. And we unfortunately get into this thing where we see ourselves as what we do is who we are. And, like you said, you wanted to do something. You're not wired to just go drink beers on the beach because you're retired now. You're wired to do something and do something more, and continue to do it and train and teach and help and come alongside and serve other people. And I think that's the epitome of a hero, of what a lot of people will say, when I invite them on the show and they say, well, I'm not a hero. If your mindset is to do more for others and you serve other people, you're a hero. That's just the bottom line in my book. And I think that we lose track of that sometimes. And the idea that you're not alone, that everybody has an opportunity to help another person, really makes a difference.
And I call it the escalator theory. When I was mentored by survivors who, they were going through their own problems,
Right.
but they were still taking their time to come to my hospital room and tell me what a hero I am.
Right.
You know, and that gets me emotional thinking about it. But what I realized was it's like an escalator. They're ascending this escalator, and then I get on the escalator, and I'm not going to experience anything that they haven't already experienced. They just got on the escalator first. And eventually, as that escalator rises, new people, new members to the club are going to get on that escalator. And I'm going to be able to share my experiences with them because I've gone a little bit further up the escalator than they have.
Right.
And then eventually, as they ascend the escalator, they're going to be able to help people. And they're going to have the wisdom of, excuse me, not only my experience, but those who came before me.
Right.
And so that it comes back around to, this is a very exclusive club. It's a tough club to join. The admission standards are a bitch. And when you get into this club, it's nobody wants to be a member, but when you are a member, your obligation as a member is to do something, anything for the next group to come in, so that they understand, as is the Wounded Blues motto, that they're never forgotten, that they're never alone.
That's fantastic. And I think that's a good point that we can hold on to as we kind of start winding down this episode and start realizing that, we have an obligation to those that are coming behind us, as an homage to those who came before us, and then to those that we need to help mentor along the way that are coming up. They're going to have a maybe even a rougher road because of whatever politics and whatever all this other stuff that's going on. The fact that people they're getting way more just obstinate. Yeah, the citizens, they're pushing the buttons because social media says they can, and whatever the case is, laws start getting more lax, or however you want to look at it, and it's getting rougher. But we still have this mindset that we want to serve and we want to do what's right because that's who we are and that's what our job is. So, I appreciate just that whole idea that you're bringing to the table. It's fantastic, and it's without people like you doing that, I think there'd be a lot of people that are kind of lost and just out to sea by themselves with no knowledge of where to go or how to get there.
That's true, and that's what I try to tell the young people that are just getting started with this. We all those old retired guys would say, "Oh, I never want to do this now," and that's not true. I mean, there are still another generation of people who are called to serve, and they are literally called to serve. They will serve, and they can't become disillusioned with the way that they're received. Every generation is received, maybe negatively at one point or another. I mean, we've gone through that with some of the other high-profile police incidents, in the last 30 years. And the perceptions of law enforcement every once in a while are, we're all just a bunch of bad guys. But you need to, if you're called to serve and you know that that's absolutely not the case, you need to tune out all that noise. You need to wake up every day and realize what your purpose is on this planet, and why you were called to serve, and what you want to accomplish in life. I mean, some people are content sitting at home on their couch and complaining about the way things are. Other people are gonna get off their couch and go out and try to change the world. And
you have to determine what your why is. What's your why, and what's your mission? And if your mission gets changed, or stopped, or you've accomplished it, what's your next mission? You're never done with a new mission. If you're still breathing, you have a job to do. And at least that's the way I look at it. And I think that you seem to be somebody that might look at it that way as well. So.
Yeah, and that's absolutely true. And, one of the best pieces of advice I got was from Sergeant Major Kyle Lamb, who, he's a well-known speaker, an Army veteran, very respected individual. And when I was struggling with my decision to retire, to stop being me, I actually asked him. I had the opportunity to talk to him, and I actually asked him. I said, "How did you deal?" Because he went through a whole very, very prominent career in the Army. He was part of the whole Black Hawk Down Mogadishu incident, and a full career in the armed forces, and retired as sergeant major at the top of his game.
Right.
And so he was the kind of guy that I looked at and I said, how did he go from an entire life of being somebody, of having a role, having his position, and how did he go from that to waking up the next morning after retirement and being Mr.
Right.
And I couldn't wrap my head around that. And so when I was making this decision to retire, I woke up every morning for 30 years with a title, with a purpose. And I was going to wake up one morning and it was going to be the end. And it was interesting because when I asked him that question, how did you deal with being at the end? He said, "You got it all wrong." He said, "It was just the beginning. It wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of the next chapter." And he said, "I'm having more fun now than I ever had back then." And he's been, in the 7 years since I've retired, he's been absolutely 100% correct. I am having a larger life now. I am doing more than I ever did back then. And all I had to do to get to that point was be brave enough to take that next step.
Yeah. And that's so cool.
You're
That's
never
so
gonna
cool.
know.
You never
You're never
do.
gonna know.
Yeah. So I just want to kind of let everybody know that if you want to get a hold of us, you want to be part of this conversation, you have questions for Bob, and you want to try to get anything like that, you can get a hold of the What's a Hero podcast on Instagram, on Twitter, Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. You can go to our website, the What's a Hero podcast.buzzsprout.com, and you can download every prior episode we've had. You can listen to them from there. I prefer downloads. And then because it has a link that goes to your podcast platform, whatever one you like, and subscribe to those, and you'll get notifications when the new episode drops. Usually I try to drop them on Mondays, and so everybody should have them by the time they wake up if you subscribe. And by downloading, it gives us numbers, helps me figure out, am I doing it right? Am I doing it wrong? Do I need to change things? If you guys think I need to change things, that's cool. Let me know. I did have one lady contact me, and she said, "Hey, do you have a list of required reading?" Because I've mentioned a couple books on here and stuff. Well, one of the books I would absolutely suggest would be Forged in Scars and Stripes, A Trooper's Victory Over Critical Injury. My last episode with Glenn Williams was Bridging the Gap. And I can go down, and I would say pretty much any book that I talk about or the authors that I speak with on this show, get these books, look at them, read them, understand where these officers are coming from, because we're not going to be able to really tell people or show people or whatever if they don't see our personal stories. They just see the stuff on the news shows them or whatever, and it never is 100% encompassing. But you get one of these books like Scars and Stripes, and you're going to see the truth, the heart that's poured into it. And this is, Bob, just while I'm going through it, the book is actually an easy read, especially for someone like me, like a cop who, if I'm sitting in an airport or I'm sitting somewhere and I'm trying to read it, it's broken down in enough with the paragraphs being almost like a police report format, and I can sit there and read it, look up, look around, and then go back down to reading it. I can have my attention broken for a little bit so I can look around, which is what something cops would like to do anyways. We like to make sure we know what's going on. But these books are fantastic. And where can people get this book if they want to get it? Where can they get it?
Well, I'm not all that sophisticated. I sell it on my website, www.forgedinscars.com. and they can get it through there. Or if you have somebody that doesn't want to do that, they can, they can reach out to you, and then we can work out, how to get a book to them. But that's pretty much it. It's not on Amazon. I'm not that sophisticated. It's not on tape. It's not an audio book. Again, I'm not that sophisticated. It was never about, again, it was never about becoming a best-selling author. Right. It was always about, sharing the story of perseverance. So www.forgedinscars.com. That's pretty much it.
So get it. I'll also put a link to it on the on all those social media pages that I talked about, so people can go there. Check this book out. It's a good book, and the story there's so much heart put into it, and you can't put a price on the life lessons that somebody learns going through hard times and good times. So, Bob, do you have any final thoughts for everybody you'd like to share?
Well, again, Ken, from the bottom of my heart, I appreciate it. It was a privilege actually getting to know you just a short while ago, and I appreciate everything that you're doing to try to shine a light on all the great things that so many wonderful public servants are doing out there, trying to just improve this world. And so, from the bottom of my heart, I thank you for what you do.
You're absolutely welcome, and I thank you for that. I sometimes you wonder if you're doing any good, and then when you hear stuff like that, it really helps solidify that, just motivate me even further. But with that, I want to thank you and everybody else that has served in the military, that has done that keeps our country safe and the country that it is. To all of our teachers, our veterans, our nurses, and those people who give, our firefighters, our EMTs, everybody that gives of themselves. And obviously I want to thank those law enforcement officers, those police officers who are out there on the front line every single day doing things for this country that make us feel safe, that we're able to sleep in our beds at night. We're able to do the things that we want to do because there's somebody that's standing on that front line, willing to help other people and do things for other people. And that's a rare thing, especially in today's day. And so thank you very much. But I want to close this out with one final thing. And this is in regards to something Dr. Askin said. So, and it's from your book, and it says, as challenged in his essay asking, what will you leave behind? Bob provides some final insights into his experience of catastrophe, trauma, and resilience. Once again, is illustrated these issues in making a major life decision such as retirement. Again, is suggested that retiring is something rather than away from something can aid that transition. Rather appropriately, Bob illustrates with examples the truth of the adage that there is nothing permanent but change. We often try to deny it or fight it or just rage against it, but change occurs in our lives and will win out. We need the wisdom to negotiate those changes. Bob also illustrates the contradictory adage that the more things change, the more they stay the same. Despite change, there are those human experiences that continue to occur. Trauma and tragedy, as in the death of Trooper Weaver, the life presenting challenges and joys, anticipated and not, falling down and needing to get back up. That life is made of challenges and contradictions. Define the need for resilience. Bob has told you his story with the wisdom to help you with yours. So, Bob, we thank you so much for being willing to open your heart and open your mind and talk with us, to write your book, and to be the man that you are. And so with those things, I just, once again, thank you so much for being on today. It's been an honor.
Thanks for having me on, and stay safe out there.
Absolutely. So for Bob Bemis, I have been Ken Frownfelter, and this has been the What's a Hero podcast. We are clear.